one of the recent webinars we did with him. It will be helpful if at the moment you mute yourselves so that we can all hear the conversation and have a discussion together. And without further ado, Scott, it's nice to see you again, and Ron and I will sit in, help administer it, and also raise questions on behalf of the audience to help facilitate the discussion.
That sounds great. Thanks for the opportunity. Love working with the PAISBOA team, that's for sure. Best run school association in the country. So one of the things we wanted to follow up on is we had a conversation at the session a few weeks ago where we were looking at how to find the gold in the HR filing cabinet. And so this is a follow-up to that. And this is kind of a key part of that was creating a performance rubric. And the purpose of the rubric is to create clarity as well as some cohesiveness around the team, right? Because we know that the most effective schools have a high-performing team that have talented, energized, and engaged educators. And so what we wanted to kind of do today is to follow up on that conversation around, well, how do you do that specifically, more tactically? What are the concrete ways to build a performance rubric? Susan pointed out from Fisher Phillips that not only is a great way to create clarity, but also for HR compliance, right? Because what they have found in providing legal support to schools is many schools get themselves in trouble because they haven't taken the time to create very concrete expectations, so that when they get feedback sometime during the school year, usually in the spring semester, it's based on some tangible evidence that expectations were communicated, and we know that we have a chance to meet those expectations when it comes down to renewing teaching positions or other positions there at the school. So one of the things we want to be able to talk about today, and I'm going to share my screen real quick. And by the way, the Zoom provides a chat window there, so you can. So there's a Zoom window there, so that you can. A chat window, so you can put it.
We're feeding back. We're getting feedback on you, so if you could mute yourself, that'd be great.
Okay.
Also, if anyone could mute themselves, that would be great.
Can you mute them? All right. Okay. Now I think we can go forward. All right. Great. So thank you for doing that. But there is a chat box there on Zoom that you can use to provide some comments back. I'd love to have some interaction with you. But I'm sharing a slide now. If you're on the phone, you may not see this, but wanted to be able to communicate that what we're trying to accomplish is clarity, right? And that clarity begins, of course, in the hiring process to begin with, of how do we make sure that we've got alignment with our mission, our culture, our strategies, and of course the position. And of course we have pretty well stated mission statements, and we may have some core values that we've shared as part of our culture, and we know that we've got specific strategies that we're implementing. Sometimes we don't have real clarity around how we're going to measure that, right? How do we give feedback on how well they're performing against these top priorities for the school, to make sure that we're going the same direction. It's a lot more fun to lead and build a school when we have again that idea of cohesiveness. We have a unity as a team, right? And so what we want to make sure that we understand is that ambiguity is not your friend, right? It's not your friend when it comes to legal issues, and it's certainly not your friend when it comes to trying to create a high-performing team that's all going the same direction together. So in doing that, we've talked about this idea of faculty engagement. I want to reiterate, as we do in every one of our sessions together, is that faculty engagement is the leading predictor of student growth as well as school growth. right? So, and that means that we have a team that they're passionate about our mission. They get our culture. They are contributing well to our culture. They are bought into our strategies. I mean, they're not just kind of tolerant of these things. They are driven by it, right? I mean, they're energized by it. And so, there's a great quote here from Dale Carnegie. It says, throw yourself into some work you believe in with all of your heart. Live for it. Die for it. And you will find happiness that you had thought could never be yours. I love that quote. And that's of course what we're looking for in building a productive team is, we want people who really they love the leadership team, they love the job, they love the people they're working with, and they love the organization, they love families, they love kids, and so in independent schools particularly, this is critical. Having faculty who are really on board with the team, they understand that they're not lone rangers out there in their four-walled kingdom of a classroom and trying to kind of do their own thing, but they're a part of the bigger picture. We're in this together. That's what we call faculty engagement. So we want to make sure that there are three elements that we know are common to organizations that achieve a high degree of engagement. They are very effective at goal setting, and they use a smart goal setting process, both short and long-term goals, as a division, as a group as well as individually. There's productive teamwork together, right? Everybody has a voice, and they listen empathetically to each other, and they decision making is pushed down to in the school, in the classroom, and to the leadership that's there sort of on the front lines of the school. And there's a motivating culture, right? I mean, great teachers want to work with great teachers, and they want to be in an environment where they can make decisions as professionals. They've got time to collaborate, and they have the ability to control sort of how they use their time to maximize results. So kind of laying this groundwork to get to a performance rubric, because a performance rubric doesn't stand on its own. It's within the context of some of the other decisions that you make as a leadership team to attract the best and brightest people. So we have a workshop that we do called Hire Well, Fire Well, right? And this all revolves around that talent rubric. So the best organizations, the best schools, when it comes to human resources, not only just for compliance, but really that what we call catalyst human resources, where they are engaging the administrative leadership on making better decisions, and they're always sparking those ideas and creating some momentum here. There's four things that are common among the best, and we visited a wide range of schools. We've seen some schools that are phenomenal when it comes to human resources and talent, and others not so much. And so but we want to kind of share with you that the top performing schools know their numbers. Okay, they know their numbers. They know their talent quotient, which is the talent quotient is the ratio of high performing faculty. And when we use the term faculty, by the way, we're talking about all the employees of the school. You call them teachers or staff or coaches or whatever role they are. We're all in the teaching. We call that faculty. So they know their talent quotient, which we're going to talk about in just a moment. Sometimes that's not a term that a lot of school leaders are familiar with. So we'll go over that in just a moment. They understand the competitive salaries and benefits. They know, and PAISBOA provides some great data on this. If you're not tapping into that database, you really need to. But understanding where you are, because that inevitably that's going to impact your capacity to attract and keep top level talent. And then finally, the other number to know is your performance rubric key metrics, right? What are you measuring, and are you measuring the right things, and is that helping you improve your value proposition and your performance as an organization? So you got to know your numbers. You also have to make sure that you know how well your team is aligned, like we talked about, with your mission, your culture, your strategies, and each position. Right? Sometimes we see schools where they're really trying to hire a math teacher, they're trying to hire a sixth grade teacher, but they skip the alignment with mission, culture, and strategies. So if you're trying to build a culture where there's a high degree of engagement and there's a family culture, Don't hire mean teachers who don't engage with each other, right? Because that undermines your goals. It creates tension. Okay? So we want to make sure that we have a real clarity around our alignment. We're checking that on a regular basis, at least 3 times a year. And in November is the perfect time to be doing that, because there are some specific conversations that you want to be having in the next 6 weeks before you break for the end of year holidays. It's critical that you have some conversations with your team that lets them know where they are in terms of what you're measuring, so that they can make appropriate adjustments. Critical. Cannot tell you how important it is from both a compliance standpoint to keep yourself out of legal trouble, but also to make sure that when you come back after those end of year holidays, that you're able to come back with momentum, with clarity, and we can go, right? So the knowing your numbers is first, talent alignment, then talent selection, that you are learning from your talent selection process. Now, we went over this in the finding the goal in the HR filing cabinet. We talked about different ways to learn from past hiring decisions to improve the process and get even better at recruiting and selecting and onboarding the best people, and then making adjustments, right? Really being that learning organization. What are you learning? How are you improving as an organization? What are you measuring overall? How are you improving the decision-making, the coaching, the mentoring, and quite frankly, the firing? Are you improving your process of offboarding, as we call it, offboarding underperforming faculty who are not contributing to your mission, your culture, your strategies, and the overall performance of the school? So those are the 4 elements that are common, again, to high-performing schools when it comes to talent. Al, do we have any questions for anybody? Are we good?
I don't see any that have been posted.
Okay, great. All right, we'll keep going then. All right, when we talk about knowing your numbers, this is what we mean. So the first thing is your talent quotient. Now, your talent quotient is calculated based on your rubric, your performance rubric, and I'm going to take you through that in just a moment. Your rubric defines what do we want, and we try to keep a rubric simple. And we're going to show you how to break that down into both quantitative and qualitative expectations, so that you can have a very specific coaching conversation with your top performers, with your lower performers, and everybody in between. And we're going to figure that out. Again, this is something that we do as a part of our talent audit. We're actually doing this for a school next week, and what we're doing there is taking them through an understanding of really the distribution, the talent distribution of our team. And that process is we guide them through an understanding of, a lot of administrators, they believe they have the best faculty, and sometimes they're unwilling to kind of face the brutal facts. So we force them into a bell curve here, right? So what we're asking the leadership to do is to break down the faculty into their bottom 20%, their middle 60%, and then their top 20%, right? So we have a bell curve, and so let's say if we have just 10 people on that divisional team, or we have 50 people across the campus.
Hiring talent.
We have a way to understand where are our best performers and what can we learn about them, right? The purpose of this talent distribution is it enables us to understand who is contributing the most to our mission, to our culture, to our strategies, and to our goals of the school, and who is not. And what are the reasons for that? Are low performers, are they low performers because of skills or because of attitude? Are they low performers because they're in the wrong position, given their strengths and their instincts and their natural abilities? Can we make some adjustments? Right? That's the goal of that talent distribution conversation. And then we also, of course, want to know from our competition, how well do we rate on those salaries, those benefits, the schedule? That's another piece that a lot of administrators are beginning to pay more attention to, right? Are we creating a quality of life for our teachers? That they can find a balance, right? Are we giving them 6-7 preps, a year? That's a lot of stress. Are we giving them time to collaborate and work together, right? Those are the things that a lot of schools are beginning to look at as a key benefit as they're attracting and keeping top talent. All right. So knowing those numbers again, kind of drilling down a little bit further, is knowing your talent quotient, your talent distribution, and how you rate against the competition. Really important part of HR talent leadership. Now, let's get to the heart of this. If you have underperformers on your campus, which every school does, so we kind of have to get past that, well, that's just them. That's all of us, okay? We all have people who we need to have some conversations with. And so what we're looking to create is a tool to have this coaching conversation, right? And so here's one thing you can know about those underperformers is when they self-evaluate, in general, they're going to rate themselves very highly, right? They're going to see themselves as a star. But using your performance rubric, you know that your evaluation of them is going to put them sort of here in the middle, right? And that gap is caused by a lack of self-awareness. And so what we want to try to create is a way for our administrative leadership to be able to have productive conversations with the team and be able to make that based on data versus kind of whether I like you or not, or kind of feeling the pressure about, well, if I make this decision, am I going to pay sort of the political consequences or other things, right? I want to do what's right for our school, for our students, and for our leadership, right? So having a rubric like this, a coaching tool like this gives us great clarity. And what we're recommending is that your X and Y axis here, your X axis is based on sort of the what, right? What are we really expecting, so that we are, what we mean by that is quantitatively, right? What is the quantitative evidence that we're looking for that would demonstrate high performance? And then, of course, the how, right? Because it's not just, we don't just want results, we also care about the relationships they're building, how they're contributing to the culture, how they're making us all better. Independent schools, we have to know that you're not just someone who's maybe a teacher in the classroom or a coach on the field. You're a part of the team. You're an ambassador of the school 24/7, right? And we have to set those expectations and have clarity around that, because that hat never comes off. Right. So what this enables us to do is to be able to communicate. Then, if we have, and what we recommend is 3 specific, qualitative measurements and 3 qualitative, results that we're looking for, things we're going to measure, so that we can now have a conversation. Now, what do you know about this chart? Well, if we define this well, the ones that are easy to make decisions about are, of course, the ones who end up in this category, right? We're here where the X is. Because these are the people who, they don't do anything and they have no relationships. Nobody likes them, right? So those are the easy people to deal with. The harder ones are the people who are in this quadrant here in the top left and then over here on the bottom right. Because these are the people who, the ones here, they don't get a lot done, but everybody likes them. I mean, they have great relationships, and they have, parents like them and kids like them, and well, that's harder to deal with. And then you have the folks over here; they're very productive. Now, people don't necessarily like them a lot, but man, do they get it done, right? So these are the harder ones to deal with and require much more proactive of coaching and mentoring. But often what we have found is that this process, it allows, once we have our rubric, we're then going to ask this coaching session that we recommend having, again, in these next few weeks before you break for the holiday. Your leadership team must be having these conversations. If you wait until the spring semester to have these, the problem is you haven't given them the opportunity to recalibrate, right? How do I step back? And because you're going to have to create a pretty significant emotional experience for them to really understand the gap that's occurred here, right? Here's where you are, and here's where I have you. And I need you to know that gap That's not good for your career. It's not good for you. It's not good for me. And we're going to have to figure out how to close that gap, right? And so what I'm going to ask you to do as a professional is help me solve this problem, because if you can't close that gap when we come back in the spring semester, then you need to know we're going to have to go a different direction. And quite often, if you've had that conversation here in the fall semester, you've given them a chance to take the time over the holidays to kind of think about that, reflect on it, and make a decision, right? And hopefully they're going to make the decision that, they're right. I'm going to have to change my approach here, and I'm going to recommit myself to this, or I'm going to kind of step back and say, maybe this isn't the place for me, and I need to go a different direction, right? And that's an okay process too, because these are the people who are going to be causing the greatest tension there on your campus, and are they're really limiting your ability to grow. They're impacting your enrollment. They're impacting your faculty culture. I promise you, these are the killers. So how do we have that conversation? We have it now. We have it because now we give them a chance to reset. We're not going to have that conversation in the spring, because these are things that you need to have those conversations about. It's been lingering. We've been kind of procrastinating on it, right? We know it's out there. It's the elephant in the room, right? So now we want to kind of step back and figure out, okay, what do we do to make sure that we, again, setting clarity, we're clear with our expectations, we're clear with how we're going to measure performance, and we're making sure that the faculty know that we're serious about this, right? And that the way that you get to this conversation is creating your performance rubric, which that's the next piece of this. But it's important that number one is that we're creating a rubric and a way of communicating that's simple, right? And we're going to use this very simple way of measurement of, do they meet expectations consistently, or do you consistently meet or exceed expectations? Are they sometimes meeting expectations, or do they not meet expectations, right? And so that's your 1, your 2, and your 3, and that's how that you create this graph. So there's your 1, your 2, and your 3, right? So that we can know on the first element where do they fit in terms of our quantitative outcomes, and then we can go 1, 2, 3, and 1, 2, 3. So that's how we get to the 9 on this axis, and then the same thing on the qualitative evidence, right? So we've got a 1, 2, 3, a 1, 2, 3, and a 1, 2, 3. So that's how we get to, this is where you want your people. Your top performers are here, right? And if they're really your top performers, you would rate them here, right? We have agreement. It's when you have these gaps is where it creates a lot of stress, because where you have someone who is underperforming, and they either sometimes meet expectations or they're not, and they think they are, that's the root of your problem, right? That's where we don't have clarity. We don't have a cohesive team together, right? So that's what we're trying to overcome as a part of this conversation. All right. So Al, are we on the same page? Is that making sense? Give me some feedback on that.
That sounds good to me. I think perhaps, unless I'm setting you up to move forward, part of the issue for most people is the clarity on what they're trying to measure and the agreement about that.
Yes. So now here's the next step, and that's a critical part, because the rubric isn't something that we kind of come up with in an administrative meeting and then we take back to the team and say, ta-da! Here it is, and now we're gonna hold you to it. Instead, this is a collaborative conversation. We are going to bring to them a set of expectations that we're going to have agreed to as a leadership team. But now we're going to introduce this to our faculty leadership, to the different elements of our faculty as we move forward, because we're going to sequence that through building engagement with them. We're kind of putting it out there as, hey, we want to have a conversation around clarity of the expectations, and we'd like to know whether you have feedback for us as we're setting this up. So let me go ahead and jump into our performance rubric here. So here's what we're looking at. And sort of what we have found that has helped schools kind of get started with this is this tool as a starting point. If you want a copy of this, just send me an email at scott@schoolgrowth.com. I'd be glad to share that with you. So just scott@schoolgrowth.com. We've got, again, the quantitative and the qualitative, right? So in our quantitative, this is things that we can numerically measure. We're looking first at their talent, right? Talented, energized, engaged educators. If we can build a team of those, if we could get to 80%, if we could get to 80% of our team truly being a high level of talent, of energy and engagement, I can assure you, I have never, ever in my life seen a school that had 80% talented, energized, and engaged educators who wasn't growing. Just haven't seen it, right? That's ultimately, if you want a strategic plan, if you want a very simple plan of what to execute, there you go. If you can build that kind of team, because it's still who first, right? As Collins talked about in Good to Great many years ago, right? It's still who. No, really, it's who first, right? So we want to be sure that we can have clarity around some of these measurements. And so we begin by looking at talent, right? When you look at, and this, if you go back to your 20-60-20, this helps inform some of the adjectives you would put into this. In your rubric, what you would define is, when it comes to talent, what would be the common characteristics of the adjectives we would use for teachers who are sort of resistors, or they're not meeting expectation when it comes to talent. And I'd love to get, if you could, in your chat window there, would love to get some comments back from you on that. So if you could, just go ahead and pop that up there in your Zoom window and give us some feedback on what is it that would be adjectives you would use to define an employee who is not meeting expectations when it comes to talent. And Al, when those come in, if you could read out a few of those, that would be great.
The silence is deafening, and that's probably because this is one of the most difficult to define in my opinion.
Okay.
Not a subject matter expert is one suggestion.
Mm-hmm.
Does not engage in PD.
Yeah, great one. Those are two very good, right? So the first one was, do they really engage in professional development, right? We don't want faculty members, if I'm having to convince you to come to professional development opportunities, you're probably in the wrong business, right? Might need to kind of pursue a different career path, because that's frustrating. We have the humility to recognize we haven't arrived yet. Yeah, a couple of other great ones: resistant to change, does not embrace technology, or some of the other strategies that we're using. Fantastic feedback, right? And that's true. So when it comes to talent, they're not trying to learn. They're not trying to make adjustments. We like to say that flexibility is a sign of intelligence, right? In other words, they recognize that we're going to have to make adjustments. We're not a perfect school. We're going to continue to make adjustments and to improve our value proposition to our families. And we need faculty who really buy into that, right? So that's a key part. So thank you very much for that feedback. So if you any others, you're welcome to still put some comments there in the chat box there on your Zoom window. So that's what we're looking for, right? Those are, and that's very common to what we have seen among schools that have gone through this process, right? They're very specific when it comes to, say, meeting sometimes meets expectations, or maybe they show up. Usually they're on time for our PD events. Usually they take feedback well. When we talk about talent, we also mean someone who is coachable, right? We want somebody who will take feedback from a very proactive, caring coaching process, and they're willing to make adjustments, right? A person who sometimes meets expectations, usually they take feedback, but sometimes they get a little defensive or other things happen, and sometimes it can be a stressful conversation, right? Whereas on a 3, tell me about that for a second. When you think about someone who consistently meets or exceeds expectations when it comes to talent, we've kind of worked up to this. What's the ideal person for you on your team when it comes to talent, right? This is someone who, they really use a leadership talent, right? I mean, they are a model for others to follow when it comes to personal development, when it comes to contributing to, they lead PD sessions, maybe. They're actively involved in trying to create collaboration, right? They're willing to, when it comes to talent, they're willing to share to make each other better, right? I mean, who wouldn't want that? That's what we're talking about when we say, because if we can define it along this path, what we're eventually looking for are people who are in that 3 column, right? But what we have seen that causes the greatest stress for teachers is they don't know how to win. They don't really know specifically what's expected of them. And here's another thing that we've seen as we've gone through this process with the administrative teams. Quite often what we have found is that different administrators, because we have them complete this process initially individually, where it's not as a group session, but individually. And then they bring that together as a team. And what's fascinating is quite often the expectations across the administrative team, they're all different, right? And boy, does that cause stress for teachers, right? Because if I'm dealing with this administrator, they're more into relationships and more soft skills. But if I talk to the person over here, it's much more technical skills and other pieces, right? So you kind of have to, you make adjustments based on who you're working with, and that's not a healthy environment. That's not what teachers want. What teachers want is clarity of expectations. What do you want? And then help me get there. Help me, create a culture around me that helps me succeed. So if you want to have faculty engagement, if you really, if that's a priority for you, which kind of should be, since that's what families are buying is faculty quality and engagement, then you want to really commit yourself, your team, especially to this process, right? Second thing we're going to look at is energy, right? When we talk about energy, what we mean is, the level of self-motivation that they bring to the table, right? How energy can be measured, for example, on do they show up for work on time? Right? Are they there? Are they there just bell to bell, or are they there before and after school and are demonstrating a real commitment to being a part of the school community, right? Providing that extra help that students need, or collaborate with their peers as well, right? Are they someone who, when they come in, it's an energy drain? In other words, it takes away from the collaboration, the communication, or are they someone who communicate so effectively, both verbally and non-verbally, that they raise the caliber of professionalism and of relationship, right? That's what we mean by energy. And so you can then map that across to say, okay, so looking at a 3, what's ideal in this situation? We want some, if you look at most of your job descriptions, it's a fairly ideal scenario here, but you want to make sure that you can clarify that in terms of the conversation with your team, so that we can know that we're a 2 or a 1 in this situation when it comes to energy. It's that moody teacher. It's that teacher who's more sarcastic, and you never know kind of what you're going to get day to day. Is it going to be the person who's really on fire and gets it, and we're in it to win it? Or is it going to be the person who's going to fire off some sarcastic comments and undermine and gossip and is just tired and doesn't even want to be here, right? And there's a big difference when you have someone who's working for the paycheck and working for the mission, right? And they're consistently working for the mission. It impacts your culture, and this is where it really becomes serious ownership of culture. Culture is someone's job, and it's everyone's job. Right, and that school culture piece is the make it or break it. That as school leadership, especially if you're involved in HR or in the business office, or you're a division leader or head of school, culture is your job. Right, creating a culture in which great faculty can thrive. That's why you're there, right? So we want to make sure that we're explicit around the expectations for that. And then finally, there's engagement. What we mean by engagement is again, that they've got every person there in the school, they have the opportunity to either go the extra mile or not, right? So they have, an energy level commitment that they can make, or they can choose not to make. And that's what we mean by engagement. Engagement doesn't mean always happiness, but it does mean that I'm committed. I'm emotionally, I am mentally, I'm fully committed to what we're doing here. Right? And there's a big difference. You've seen it across your campus. The faculty who truly have a higher degree of engagement, they typically are having the best impact on kids, right? And so, and again, when you look at the research from Harvard and Gallup and TNTP and others, NAIS as well, what do we know? Again, faculty talent, energy, and engagement is the leading predictor of student growth, as well as your enrollment growth and your funding growth, right? So engagement means, of course, are they willing to go that extra mile? Are they willing to really engage in the life of our faculty community, as well as our student community and our parent community, and do what it takes to respond to situations versus react, right? Are they willing to be an empathetic listener, or are they just going to kind of do their thing and kind of talk to the hand, right? Are they willing to be that 24/7 ambassador for the school, or are they just kind of checking the box bell to bell, and then they're willing to kind of fire off and create gossip or dissension around conversations that might be happening at birthday parties or at sporting events or other things, right? That's how you know. And you want to be able to communicate explicitly what it looks like. What does it look like for somebody on your campus to not meet expectations in that way, right? To sometimes meet expectations, and then to consistently meet or exceed expectations. Your goal as an administrator is to cultivate a team that's moving to the right. Okay? And the more that you can do that, the higher the quality of life gets for you, the higher the quality of experience gets for your families, especially your students, and the higher your key metrics will move when it comes to the overall performance of the school. So that's what we mean by the quantitative aspect. Now, you can change those up. You can use other things there, however you see fit. We just kind of use this as a starting point, but being able to define 3 primary quantitative buckets for you to measure, that's the key of what we're trying to create here. So when it comes to a teacher, for example, right, when we talk about the quantitative measurements for engagement, well, one quantitative measurement here is for engagement is, hey, we need to see student growth, right? We want to see when it comes down to testing and other materials, that's a real measurement that we want to see. We can do growth testing as well. Maybe that's what we're going to use. We're also looking for completion of the scope and sequence of the curriculum, as well as the scope and sequence of our student product. A very important strategic advantage if you can define a scope and sequence of student product, right? So that's what we're looking to create with this. Is a conversation now. Once we've defined the initial version of this, then we engage our faculty in a conversation around it, because they get it. We've never had a faculty that was sort of put off by this process. They like, for the most part, your better teachers, they like knowing sort of that you're going to establish expectations in this way, and that you're going to hold the members of the team accountable for getting up to that level of performance. So we've actually seen a lot of positive impact, especially where they're drawn into the conversation, not where it's kind of pushed down on them, but it's an interactive now conversation, because we're going to flesh this out. We're going to come up with a 1.0 version of this. It doesn't have to be perfect, right? I mean, you're looking forward to kind of get started with it, get it out there. Let's have a conversation around it, and let's make sure that we can refine it. We can make adjustments to it, but we're going to hold ourselves accountable to our rubric. We're going to have these conversations at least 3 times a year. We recommend those conversations happen in November, October, November, but November at the latest. Then they happen again in February, March, and then finally they happen again in May, June. right? So we're assessing the team, we're making sure that we have clarity around our expectations, and we're holding ourselves accountable to the highest level of performance. Because in the end, when it goes back to that 20-60-20 review, those bottom 20% performers, those are the ones that are doing significant damage to your brand, to your students, and to your leadership. You have to know that those are the people who are creating the greatest tension and drag. So what can you do? How can you help them? They don't want to be there either, right? They want to know how to improve, or they want to be given the opportunity to do something else, right? And the greatest blessing you can be to them is to be clear about your expectations, and when it's not being met, then make the decisions, make those hard decisions that are required to advance your talent quotient. So because your talent quotient, again, is the ratio of threes, right, of the people who are in this zone to the ones who are not. And by the way, sometimes people want to kind of say, well, they're a 2.5 or they're a 2.7. You always round down, right? So if they're a 2.5, they're a 2. If they're a 2.95, they're a 2. Right? So we're always going to round down, because if they're not consistently meeting or exceeding expectations, then they're a 2, right? They're sometimes meeting expectations. So we want to be very clear. Now, we have seen schools that will kind of dumb this down, so they do move up higher. That doesn't help anybody. So having an independent way, giving some independent validation of your rubric, giving you feedback on that, will prevent some of that temptation to try to dumb down your rubric to still hit your numbers. But when engaging the process of creating this type of a rubric is as useful and powerful for your school as the end result. Okay? So just know that if you do this well, it will actually build culture. It's not going to be creating a hammer to beat the faculty over the head with. Okay. Give me some feedback there in the Zoom window. Would love any questions that you have. Put it there in the chat window. I've got it up now so we can respond to that, and I'll try to weave that into this conversation. We've got a few more minutes, so I want to continue this, kind of drill down into the qualitative aspects of your rubric as well. So the second part of this is now looking at more of those, the soft results, right? The quantitative might be more numerical, the hard results. This is more of the soft results, right? So what we're looking for next is, are they contributing well to our mission, right? Many of you have some beautiful mission statements, but each of our faculty members, how well are they contributing to our mission? Right? And we can measure that, and of course your mission statements vary widely. So, but part of that is around providing a level of excellence, right? So I think that's the word that's used on 99% of school websites is the term excellence, right? So is this someone who is demonstrating a level of excellence that it's consistent with our mission? Are they, if we have a specific philosophy of education that we're implementing as a part of our mission, is that true? One mission statement that one of our clients uses is to increase the capacity for human greatness, right? How cool is that? You talk about a motivating mission statement, increase the capacity for human greatness. And so they measure that, is this person truly someone who is increasing their own capacity for human greatness? And are they building relationships in ways that enables them to do that with their students, right? And so they measure that through their mission impact. They also look at their culture and strategies impact, right? Based on what we have said are key aspects of our culture, whether we want a academically, advanced culture, or we're doing a more family closeness relationship piece, is this someone who contributes well to that or not, right? And we can provide specific adjectives or statements in each one of these categories that would clarify, is this someone who really is contributing well, or are they not? And then finally, the position impact. And what we mean by that is, if they're a teacher, if they're a coach, or if they're a receptionist, right, are they contributing well to the expectations that we have for that position, and how well, right? Are they meeting the expectations of the job description overall in terms of, again, the relationships? A lot of the aspects that are on the job description are more of those qualitative aspects. Well, is that true or is that not true, right? And how true? Is that a 1, a 2, or a 3? Again, when you're able to score that out, what we're eventually, if you want to build a high-performing team that is making an impact on kids' lives in remarkable ways, is creating a high quality of life for you, is creating an economically sustainable plan for the school, then you're going to want a higher ratio of 3s there on your campus. It's a very easy math to do. And if you're honest with you, here we have one school who committed themselves to this process. And over a 3-year period of time, they moved the percentage of people. And by the way, when we go through this process, this audit process, the majority of the schools are between 20 and 25% 3s. And that has been consistent after doing this hundreds of times. Now, when they come into the conversation, they often see it as much higher than that. But when they have to go through the process of breaking it down, they are always willing to acknowledge, okay, you're right. It's around 20, 25%. Now, what decisions then could be made from a talent perspective and a leadership perspective? What are the decisions that we could make to move that up, right? Because as that moves up, powerful things happen. And this one school that started that process over a 3-year period of time radically committed to increasing their ratio of 3s, their TQ. They ended up in a 3-year period growing 40% in a population area that had a flat or declining student population. They raised more money in that 3-year period than they had in the previous 30-year existence of the school. And they had the highest level of student growth. This is a private school that actually participated in the state voucher program. So they had to do the same testing as the other schools in the state. And it was growth testing. They had the highest level of student growth of any school in the state. Not just because they had selective enrollment like all of our independent schools have, but the actual growth rate of the schools, right? Powerful things can happen when you can be explicit around the expectations of performance. And here's the key part of this, you can't throw this out there and then just kind of let it sit. You have to have that cycle of learning together where you revisit this and you recalculate your TQ, right? It's the same thing if you want to, improve your health. One of the things they've shown that you can do with your iPhone app, like an app like Lose It or some of the others, is if you start tracking your eating, regardless of whether you intentionally try to lose weight or change your diet, just by looking at the data, you will start improving your life, your health, about 18%. 18%, not even making a conscious decision to do anything different. Just because you're looking at the data and you're having to input it, it changes your behavior. And the same thing is true with your talent rubric. When you begin to look at the numbers, when you begin to have these conversations with your administrative team, it creates common language. So you have a cohesiveness and you have a clarity, right? We're going in the same direction. We know what our expectations are. So as we're making hiring decisions, as we're making rehiring decisions, as we're coaching, and as we're making offboarding or firing decisions, we have a very clear now a rubric, a tool that we can have conversations around. It takes the emotion out of it, and I can really, as a leadership, as a principal or as an athletic director or a head of school, I can have conversations now that are very concrete, and I don't have to kind of be caught up in a lot of the. Inevitably, those conversations are always emotional, but this gives a concreteness and an objectivity to that conversation that really empowers the leaders to make better decisions. Because the personnel decisions that our leadership makes, it determines the trajectory of children's lives, right? So it's important that we get this right, and we really commit ourselves to being, rock stars when it comes to talent measurement and talent development. Okay, so that kind of gives you an overview of one technique for creating a performance rubric. Again, the goal is keep it simple, right? Because when it's simple, it's much more manageable and it's more likely to have effect on the results that you want. Your ultimate goal is to create that team of talented, energized, engaged educators. And if you can create a tool like that to be able to have those conversations and equip your leadership, your division leaders, your principals, your athletic directors, and the others with a tool like that to have those coaching conversations, and quite frankly, to have those, the candor that's required to be able to navigate through some of the inevitable changes that have to be made, then you're going to see much better results, and you're going to see a campus that is far more able to inspire children's lives and has a quality of life for the adults that are on campus as well. So Al, that's the strategy for building that talent rubric, and I hope that provides some really guidelines that are the folks on the call today and those watching the recording will be able to begin to use. If you want more details about that, again, be glad to provide that along with the slides. It's scott@schoolgrowth.com, and we can share more of those details about how to implement those strategies there on your campus.
Scott, thank you. I just want to add to the body of knowledge for a second and give people a chance to type in any questions they have in the chat board, and then we'll take it up. I want to focus on the importance of the mission statement for a second, because a lot of schools have them and they rarely sort of touch them after they put a lot of time and effort into creating them. And there's a range of people on this webinar. Some are involved with HR, and they might not have attended one that I brought to the organization, or we did last spring, about the turnaround story of Great Lakes Country Day. And it's recorded, and we have it in our library called Back to the Brink.
Oh,
most
nice.
importantly, the most important teaching point, I think, in that lesson was indeed the importance of a meaningful, effective, and understandable mission statement. And so not only did they create it and emphasize it, but every single person in the institution, all of the faculty and staff, committed to its memorization. And that, although that sounds laborious or even penal, it really wasn't that, because of the way they built that model and the fun they had with it amongst each other.
Oh, that's awesome.
So I say that because a lot of times the focus on the mission statements helps people to focus truly on the mission of the school.
Yeah.
And that's a very constructive exercise, given other things that you've said to complement that.
You can't expect people to work for the mission, be committed to it, if they don't really know what it is. And we kind of use some in our faculty engagement workshop. We kind of challenge the faculty to kind of memorize it. And what does it mean to really live that out? And you're right. Those are very, very healthy conversations to have as a leadership team. I mean, every board member should have it memorized as well, for that matter, because that's why you do what you do. Yeah, and so, yeah, I agree with you, Al. I think that's a great video resource to go back and rewatch to remind ourselves about that importance.
If anybody has any particular questions, you're welcome to unmute yourselves as well. It would be helpful to Ron and I to know who signed on as KH, because that could be a lot of people. And we're keeping track of attendance, only in the sense of being able to share material out with you if necessary or appropriate.
Gotcha.
And
yeah.
We are recording this session, as everybody should know.
Yeah, be glad to answer any questions at all. If you'd like to unmute yourself or raise your hand and address any questions you have about performance rubrics or about talent development, talent audit.
There's a few great people on the call who aren't usually so quiet. Marianne, Michael, Gail, to name a few.
No problem.
I'll be happy to address any questions you might have.
Hi, yep. Al, it's Marianne. Since you did mention my name, Scott, can you send us oh, you did it already. You sent the email address. Thank you. You're awesome.
No problem.
You back, but I don't have my camera on. By the way, you guys look very photogenic today. Thank you.
My pleasure, of course. Yeah, so as we kind of mentioned, again, welcome to unmute anytime here. This is the time to have some of those conversations. We do recommend having those, doing your audit before Thanksgiving is ideal so that they can come back from the Thanksgiving break. You got about 2 weeks in there generally to have some of those important conversations, those coaching sessions. For some, they call them prayer meetings. For some, whatever you want to call them, where you're having to have that it's just being brutally honest with those folks that you know are not contributing well to the mission, to the culture, to the strategies. You got to have those conversations now. It will save you a legal headache down the road, and it will give, if you really love your people, give them a chance to respond to that. Be honest with them and give them this feedback, and then give them a chance to respond to it and make some improvements. If they can't, then we just have to acknowledge that together and move on. But it's a great way to affirm. And by the way, it's also a great time for your top 20% is to have a conversation with them to say, thank you. You are changing kids' lives. Thank you. You're making my life better. Thank you, right? Develop that, when you start celebrating those top performers and let other people know why they're top performers, that usually contributes well, if it's done right, to your culture.
Scott, that's the perfect setup for me. Unless there are other questions, we're approaching the 1 o'clock deadline, and I really want to thank everyone for taking the time out to attend. You're probably having lunch too, so it's a great time to have that, so to speak, lunch and learn. Scott, thanks so much for your continuing contributions to us. We're now well into the 3rd year of our relationship, and the value you bring to us because of your knowledge and experience uniquely with independent schools means a lot to all of us. So many thanks.
Truly our pleasure. Anything we can do to help school leaders and schools grow, we're in. So admire what you guys do very much.
With that, I'll say goodbye to everyone. Thanks for attending. Ron will be sending out information about how to get a hold of this, and it'll be posted in our library. So thanks so much for attending. Have a good day.
Thanks for everything, Scott.
Bye, Scott. Congratulations again to you and Tammy.
Oh, thank you very much. All right, we'll talk soon.
All righty. Bye.
Bye now.